The coroner pulled back the white sheet, and my entire world turned into ice. They told me it was a tragic accident. They said Oliver and Quinn, my 6-year-old twins, had just slipped off the boat while playing. But water doesn't leave thumb-shaped bruises on a child's throat. I stared at the purple mark on Oliver's neck, and the grief in my chest instantly turned into something else. It turned into a mission. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. 72 hours ago, I was lying in the dirt on a ridge in a country most people couldn't find on a map. I was looking through the scope of a sniper rifle, waiting for a target who had hurt a lot of innocent people. The wind was hot, the sand was in my teeth, and my heartbeat was slow, steady. I was doing what I did best, hunting monsters. Then the comms crackled in my ear. It wasn't a tactical update. It was the base commander. His voice sounded wrong. It sounded soft. "Hunter," he said, "stand down. You have a Red Cross message. Evac is inbound. In the Delta Force, we don't ask questions. We pack up and move." But the flight back to the States was the longest 10 hours of my life. I sat in the back of a C-130 transport plane, surrounded by the deafening roar of engines, staring at a picture of my boys taped inside my helmet. Oliver and Quinn. They had my eyes and their mother's smile. They were the only reason I kept coming back from these deployments. I remembered the last time I saw them, 3 months ago. They were wrestling on the lawn, laughing so hard they were gasping for air. I promised them I'd take them fishing when I got back. Now, I was standing in a sterile, freezing room in a county morgue in Oregon. The smell of antiseptic and cold steel filled my nose. It's a smell I know well, but it never hit me like this. Not when it's your own blood on the table. The coroner, a tired-looking man named Dr. Evans, stood by the door. He looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Hunter, I can't express how sorry I am. Drowning it's a peaceful way to go, if that's any consolation." "Show me," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like gravel grinding together. He hesitated, then walked over to the first table. He pulled back the sheet. There was Oliver. He looked like he was sleeping, his skin pale and cold. My knees almost buckled. The strength that let me carry 100 pounds of gear up a mountain just evaporated. I reached out and touched his hand. It was freezing. "And Quinn?" I asked. Dr. Evans uncovered the second table. Quinn looked exactly the same. My two little shadows. Gone. "The police report says the boat capsized," Dr. Evans said gently. "The lake water is cold this time of year. Hypothermia likely set in before the drowning. It was an accident, sir." I leaned in closer to Oliver. I have spent 15 years in the darkest corners of the world. I have been trained to see things other people miss. I noticed the disturbance in the dust, the tripwire hidden in the grass, the slight twitch in a liar's eye. I looked at Oliver's neck. Right there, just below the jawline, was a faint, purplish discoloration. To a civilian, it looked like lividity, the settling of blood after death. I looked closer. The shape was distinct. It was oval, about the size of a man's thumb. I moved to Quinn. I checked his arms. On his left bicep, there were 3 small, distinct bruises in a row, like fingers grabbing a fleeing child. My heart stopped racing. It went dead calm. The Delta State. Who was with them? I asked, not looking up. "Your ex-wife, Violet, and her partner, Felix. They were treated for shock and minor hypothermia, but they survived." I covered my boys. I did it slowly, tucking the sheet around their shoulders like I was putting them to bed for the last time. "Where are they?" "They are in the waiting room, sir. They refused to leave until you arrived." I turned around. I didn't say thank you. I walked out of that cold room and into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. At the end of the hall, I saw them. Violet was sitting on a plastic chair, her head in her hands. She looked small, frail. We had been divorced for 2 years. The deployments were too hard on her, and I understood that. I never blamed her for leaving. I only asked her to keep the boys safe. Next to her sat Felix. I had only met him once, briefly, during a drop-off. He was a real estate developer. Expensive suit, white teeth, firm handshake. The kind of guy who buys a boat but doesn't know how to tie a knot. He was rubbing Violet's back, whispering something in her ear. I walked toward them. My boots were heavy on the linoleum floor. Thud, thud, thud. Violet looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen. When she saw me, she burst into fresh tears. She stood up and ran to me, collapsing against my chest. "Hunter, I'm so sorry," she wailed. "I'm so sorry. It happened so fast. The wind, the wave." I tried to grab them. I stood there, arms at my sides. I didn't hug her back. I couldn't. Felix stood up. He looked sad. He had the perfect tragic expression on his face. He walked over, extending a hand. "Hunter," he said, his voice deep and somber. "I can't imagine your pain. We did everything we could. The water, it was just too rough." I looked at his hand. I didn't take it. I looked at his face. I scanned him the way I scan a threat. His eyes were dry. He was breathing evenly. And then I saw it. Just a flicker. A tiny micro-expression when he realized I wasn't shaking his hand. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't fear. It was annoyance. He was annoyed that I wasn't playing along with the script. "Tell me exactly what happened," I said. Felix pulled his hand back, adjusting his expensive watch. "Like Violet said, we were out on the lake. The weather turned. A rogue wave hit us broadside. The boat flipped. I grabbed Violet. By the time we surfaced, the boys were gone. It was dark. We screamed for them for an hour." "A rogue wave," I repeated. "On Crystal Lake." Crystal Lake is a small, enclosed body of water. It doesn't get rogue waves. It barely gets ripples. "It was a freak accident," Felix insisted, stepping slightly in front of Violet, shielding her. "Look, man, I know you're hurting. We all are. But interrogating us right now isn't going to bring them back." He put a hand on my shoulder. "That was a mistake." In a fraction of a second, I grabbed his wrist. I didn't twist it. I just squeezed. I squeezed with the grip strength of a man who climbs cliffs with 70 pounds of gear. Felix gasped, his eyes widening in shock. He tried to pull away, but he was trapped. "Don't touch me," I whispered. I leaned in close to his face. "And don't lie to me." I saw the bruises, Felix. His face went pale. For a second, the mask slipped. Pure panic flashed in his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his voice rising an octave. "Maybe they hit the boat when it flipped." I let go of his wrist. He stumbled back, rubbing the red marks I left on his skin. Violet looked between us, confused and hysterical. "Hunter, stop." He tried to save them. He almost drowned trying to save them. I looked at my ex-wife. She believed it. She truly believed this man was a hero. She didn't see the wolf standing next to her. "I'm going to the police station," I said, my voice flat. "I want to see the report." "The FBI is already handling it because it happened on federal parkland," Felix said quickly. "Agent Grant. He already cleared the scene. It's over, Hunter. It's done." He said it with a finality that made my blood boil. "It's done." Like he was closing a business deal. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back at them. As I pushed through the double doors into the parking lot, the cold night air hit my face. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call the police. I dialed a number that doesn't exist in any phone book. A number for a man named Ghost who handles intelligence for my unit. "I need a background check," I said when the line clicked open. "Name is Felix Thorne. Go deep. I don't care about his credit score. I want to know who he buried." I got into my truck. I wasn't a father grieving anymore. The war had just followed me home. The rain didn't fall. It hung in the air like a cold mist, soaking into everything. I stood at the edge of the cemetery, watching the black umbrellas gather like a flock of crows. It had been 3 days since the morgue. 3 days of silence. 3 days of sharpening the blade inside my mind. I adjusted the collar of my dress uniform. It was the only suit I owned, my Army service uniform. The chest was heavy with ribbons and medals, tokens of valor from wars that felt million miles away. None of those medals mattered today. They couldn't stop the two small mahogany boxes sitting above the open earth. I walked toward the grave site. The wet grass squished under my boots. The crowd was large, friends of Violet, business associates of Felix. People who didn't know my boys. People who were here for the social event, not the tragedy. As I broke through the circle of umbrellas, the whispering stopped. Eyes turned to me. I saw pity in some, fear in others. I was the ghost from the past, the dangerous ex-husband who played with guns while Felix made money. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked at the front row. Violet was sitting in a folding chair, draped in black. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 3 days. Her eyes were glazed over, staring at nothing. Her hands were trembling in her lap. Standing directly behind her, with a hand firmly on her shoulder, was Felix. He was wearing a custom-tailored black suit. He held a large umbrella over Violet, sheltering her. To everyone else, he looked like the pillar of strength, the devoted partner holding up the grieving mother. But I wasn't looking at the picture he was painting. I was looking at the details. I moved closer, stopping just a few feet away. The priest, a young man who looked nervous, was murmuring words about peace and resting. I tuned him out. I focused on Felix. He was crying. Or, he was making the sounds of crying. He dabbed a handkerchief to his eyes, his shoulders shaking with practiced rhythm. "It's just so unfair," I heard a woman whisper behind me. "Look at him. He loved those boys like his own." I watched Felix's hand on Violet's shoulder. It wasn't comforting her. His fingers were digging in slightly. Every time Violet started to sway or let out a sob, his grip tightened. It was subtle, a control mechanism. He was grounding her, keeping her sedated and compliant. I took a step forward. Felix looked up. For a second, through the rain and the tears, our eyes locked. He paused mid-sob. He didn't blink. I analyzed him. In the field, we call it baseline assessment. His breathing was regular. Too regular for a man in hysterical grief. His face was flushed, but his neck wasn't. And then he checked his watch. It was a quick glance. A flicker of the wrist. He pulled his sleeve back, checked the time, and covered it again. He was bored. He was waiting for this to be over so he could go back to his life. The service ended. The crowd began to shuffle, moving toward the cars. I stayed. I had to see them. I walked up to the coffins. They were closed. I placed my hand on the first one. "Oliver, I'm sorry I wasn't there." I whispered, my voice cracking for the first time. "I'm sorry I was fighting everyone else's war instead of protecting you." I moved to Quinn's box. I rested my forehead against the cold wood. The rage in my gut was a physical weight, like swallowing hot coals. "Hunter." The voice was slurred. I turned. Violet was standing there. She had broken away from Felix's grip for a second. She swayed, almost falling, but I caught her arm. "Vi," I said softly. "What did they give you?" She blinked, trying to focus on my face. Her pupils were pinpoint small. "Valium," she mumbled. "And something else." "Felix." Felix said I needed to sleep. "I can't think, Hunter." "The water, it was so dark." "What about the water, Vi?" I asked, gripping her arms gently. "What happened on the boat?" She frowned, her brow furrowing as if she was trying to grab a memory that was slipping away like smoke. "The engine, it stopped. Felix went to the back to fix it. Then a noise. A loud thud. And then we were in the water. But, Hunter, the water was flat. Why did we flip?" "Violet." Felix appeared out of the mist like a wraith. He stepped between us, breaking my hold on her. "Leave her alone, Hunter," Felix hissed. His voice was low, menacing, completely different from the grieving stepfather act he had put on for the crowd. "Can't you see she's barely holding it together? She doesn't need you interrogating her. She's medicated to the gills, Felix," I said, standing my ground. I was 3 inches taller than him, and about 40 pounds heavier. "Why don't you want her to talk?" "She's in shock," Felix snapped. He wrapped his arm around Violet, pulling her into him. "We are going home. Don't come to the house. If you harass us again, I'll get a restraining order. I have lawyers who will bury you in paperwork. You like burying things, don't you?" I asked. The color drained from his face. What is that supposed to mean? It means I saw the bruises, I said. And I saw you check your watch 5 minutes ago. Felix sneered. The mask dropped completely for just a second. You're a loser, Hunter. You lost your wife. You lost your kids. Go back to playing soldier. There's nothing for you here. He turned and guided Violet toward a waiting black limousine. I watched her go. She looked back at me through the rear window, her face pale and confused, a prisoner in a luxury car. I turned back to the graves. The cemetery workers were waiting respectfully at a distance to lower the caskets. I reached into my pocket and pulled out 2 objects. They were my challenge coins. Heavy, brass medallions with the Delta Force insignia on one side and the unit motto on the other. Oppressors beware. I placed one on Oliver's casket. I placed one on Quinn's casket. Sleep well, boys, I said. The rain ran down my face, mixing with the one tear I allowed to fall. Daddy has work to do. I turned on my heel and walked away. I didn't go to my truck. I walked straight to the black sedan parked near the gate. I knew who was inside. I tapped on the glass. The window rolled down. Agent Grant of the FBI sat in the driver's seat, drinking coffee. He looked annoyed that I had spotted him. Mr. Hunter, Grant said. I was just keeping an eye on things, making sure emotions didn't run high. Get out of the car, Grant, I said. Excuse me. I said get out. We need to talk about the accident report, or I can drag you out through the window. Grant sighed, put his coffee down, and opened the door. Look, I know you're special forces or whatever, but out here, you're just a civilian, and you're treading on thin ice. The ice is already broken, I said. Now tell me why you closed the case in 24 hours. Grant leaned against his sedan, crossing his arms over his chest. He wore the standard-issue cheap suit of a federal agent who spent too much time behind a desk and not enough time in the field. He looked at me with a mix of pity and irritation, like I was a pothole in his road. The case was closed in 24 hours because the evidence was conclusive, Grant said, his voice flat. We have the statements. We have the coroner's preliminary ruling. It was an accident. A tragedy, sure, but an accident. The coroner said my boys were bruised, I said, stepping into his personal space. He said the marks were inconsistent with a simple drowning. Grant didn't flinch, but his eyes shifted to the left. Attell. The coroner is a small-town doctor, Mr. Hunter. He isn't a forensic pathologist. When a boat flips, bodies get battered. They hit the hull, the propeller, rocks on the bottom. It's ugly, but it's not a crime. Felix said a rogue wave hit them. I pressed. On Crystal Lake. Grant sighed, pulling a file folder from the passenger seat. He tapped it against his palm. Weather reports show gusts of wind up to 30 miles per hour that evening. Sudden squalls happen. Look, I get it. You need someone to blame. But Felix Thorne is a respected businessman. He has no criminal record. He had no motive. He was out there trying to bond with your kids. He hated them, I said quietly. That's your grief talking, Grant said, opening his car door. Go home, Hunter. Mourn your children. If you keep pushing this, if you keep harassing Mr. Thorne or my office, I will have you picked up for obstruction of justice. Do we understand each other? He got in, slammed the door, and drove off. The tires kicked up wet gravel, spraying my dress shoes. I watched his taillights fade into the mist. He was lying. I didn't know why yet. Maybe he was lazy, maybe he was incompetent, or maybe Felix had friends in high places, but Grant was hiding something. I didn't go home. I went to the lake. Crystal Lake was a 40-minute drive north. It was a playground for the wealthy. Huge glass houses sat on the hills, overlooking the water. Private docks, expensive boats, manicured lawns. It was quiet today. The gray sky made the water look like a sheet of lead. I pulled my truck up to the public boat launch. The yellow police tape was gone. The world had already moved on. I walked to the end of the dock and stared at the water. It was still, dead still. I crouched down, dipping my hand in. Freezing. But there was no current. This wasn't a river. It was a basin. I took out my phone and pulled up the historical weather data for the night they died. I have access to military-grade meteorological archives. I scrolled back 3 days. Wind speed, for miles per hour. Gusts, none. Precipitation, none. Grant had lied to my face. There was no squall. There was no 30-mile-per-hour wind. I looked across the water to the private marina where Felix kept his boat. I needed to see the vessel. I drove around the perimeter to the marina. The gate was locked, but locks don't stop men like me. I hopped the fence in a blind spot between the security cameras. I moved silently down the rows of luxury yachts until I found Slip 42. The boat was there. It had been towed back in. It wasn't a small fishing dinghy. It was a 24-foot pontoon boat with a fiberglass hull. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. A pontoon boat is essentially a floating patio. It is wide, flat, and incredibly stable. You could have a dance party on one side of it, and it wouldn't tip. To flip this boat, you would need a hurricane. Or a crane. Impossible, I whispered. I jumped onto the deck. I checked the railing. It was bent on the starboard side. Not crushed, just bent outward. Like something heavy had been pushed against it. I knelt down and examined the floor. The carpet was still damp. I pulled a small UV light from my pocket, part of my everyday carry kit. I shone it near the bent rail. There were scratches, deep gouges in the aluminum. I ran my finger over them. They weren't from rocks. Rocks leave jagged, chaotic marks. These were straight, parallel. They looked like drag marks. My mind started reconstructing the scene. They didn't flip. The boat never capsized. That was the lie Felix sold to the cops, and the cops bought it because they didn't want to do the paperwork on a double homicide. If the boat didn't flip, then Oliver and Quinn didn't fall out. They were thrown. I felt a wave of nausea hit me, but I shoved it down. I needed more. I needed the timeline. I climbed back off the boat and vanished into the woods before security made their rounds. 2 hours later, I was sitting in my truck outside the sheriff's department. I couldn't get the FBI file, but 911 calls are public record. I had a contact inside, a dispatcher named Mary who I'd gone to high school with. She met me at the back door during her smoke break. "I shouldn't be doing this, Hunter," she said, handing me a USB drive. Her hands were shaking. "If Grant finds out." "He won't," I said. "Thank you, Mary." I plugged the drive into my laptop. There was one call recorded from that night. It came from Felix's cell phone. I put on my headphones and pressed play. Static. Then heavy breathing. 911. "What is your emergency?" "Help. Oh God, help." The boat flipped. "My kids. They're in the water." It was Felix. He sounded frantic. Perfect acting. But I wasn't listening to his voice. I was listening to the background. I cranked the volume up. I isolated the background noise using audio software I had on my laptop. If the boat had flipped and they were in the water, I should hear splashing. I should hear wind. I should hear the water hitting the microphone. I heard silence. And then, very faintly, a sound I recognized instantly. Chirp, 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 crickets, and the low hum of an engine idling. He wasn't in the water. He was on land, or sitting comfortably on the boat. I looked at the timestamp of the call, 9:42 p.m. Then I looked at the coroner's report I had glimpsed earlier. Time of death was estimated between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. He waited. He killed them, waited an hour to make sure they were gone, and then he made the call. I slammed the laptop shut. The plastic casing cracked under my grip. This wasn't an investigation. It was a cover-up. Grant either knew and didn't care, or he was too stupid to look at the spectral analysis of a phone call. I started the truck. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I drove back to the FBI field office. It was late now, almost midnight. The building was dark, except for a few lights on the second floor. I didn't go in. I waited. 20 minutes later, Grant came out. He was walking with someone. It was a lawyer. I recognized him from the local news. Expensive suits. Defends the worst criminals in the city. And walking right behind them, shaking Grant's hand, was Felix. They were laughing. Felix clapped Grant on the shoulder, handed him a thick envelope, and got into his sports car. The puzzle pieces snapped together with a violent click. It wasn't incompetence. It was corruption. Felix had bought his way out of a murder charge. I sat there in the dark, watching the man who killed my children drive away. I watched the man sworn to bring him to justice count a bribe in the parking lot. I reached under my seat and unlocked a heavy steel case. I pulled out my sidearm. For a second, just a second, I thought about ending it right there. I could take the shot. 2 bullets. 2 bodies. But that was too easy. That was too quick. They had terrified my boys. They had made them suffer in the cold, dark water. A bullet was mercy, and I was all out of mercy. I put the gun back. I put the truck in gear. The system had failed. The law was dead. Okay, I said to the empty cab of my truck. We do it my way. I drove toward my storage unit. I had gear there that hadn't seen the light of day since my last tour in Syria. The father was gone. The operator was active. The metal roll-up door of the storage unit rattled loudly as I shoved it open. The smell hit me immediately. Gun oil, stale air, and old canvas. This wasn't a place for memories. It was a place for war. I flipped the switch on the battery-powered lantern. The light revealed walls lined with Pelican cases, tactical vests, and equipment that didn't exist in any civilian catalog. I sat on a reinforced crate and opened my laptop. It was a hardened military tough book designed to survive a mortar blast. I wasn't here to load weapons yet. I was here to load ammunition of a different kind. My phone buzzed. It was a secure text from Ghost, my intel contact at the Pentagon. Subject: Felix Thorne. Level 4 deep dive complete. Check your secure inbox. You're not going to like this. I cracked my knuckles and logged in. The file downloaded in seconds. I started reading, and with every page, the cold rage in my chest turned into ice. Agent Grant had said Felix was a respected businessman with a clean record. On the surface, that was true. No arrests, no convictions. But Ghost had dug deeper. He accessed sealed insurance claims, civil court settlements, and archived police notes from 3 different states. Felix Thorne wasn't a businessman. He was a predator. Incident 1, 5 years ago. Arizona. Felix was a junior partner at a real estate firm. The senior partner, a man named Marcus, fell off a balcony during a company retreat. Cause of death: accidental fall due to intoxication. Result: Felix inherited the firm's client list and a $2 million key man insurance policy. Note from the investigating officer: witness testimony inconsistent, but no physical evidence of foul play. Incident 2, 3 years ago. Nevada. Felix was engaged to a wealthy heiress named Julianne. 2 weeks before the wedding, her car went off a canyon road. Cause of death: brake failure. Result: Felix was the sole beneficiary of her life insurance. He walked away with $4 million. Note: brake lines were severed, but damage ruled consistent with impact terrain. I scrolled down to the present day. To Violet. I knew Violet's parents had passed away last year. I knew they had left a substantial trust fund. What I didn't know, what Violet probably didn't even understand, was the structure of that trust. I pulled up the legal documents Ghost had hacked from the family lawyer's server. The trust: $10 million. Primary beneficiaries: Oliver and Quinn Hunter. Trustee: Violet Hunter. Clause 4A. In the event of the children's death, the entire principal sum transfers immediately to the mother, unrestricted. I stared at the screen. The white text blurred for a second. It wasn't about hate. It wasn't about jealousy. My boys were dead because they were obstacles. Felix didn't kill them because he snapped. He didn't kill them because they were annoying him. He killed them because they were standing between him and $10 million. He had done the math. He had calculated the risk. He seduced Violet, isolated her, and waited for the perfect moment. He knew that if the boys were out of the picture, the money would flow to Violet. And since he had Violet wrapped around his finger, medicated and dependent, the money was effectively his. "You soulless monster," I whispered. I looked at the timeline. Felix met Violet 3 weeks after her parents' will was read. He proposed to her 6 months later. The accident happened 2 weeks after he moved in. It was a script. He had played this role before. He was a serial killer who used gravity, water, and mechanics instead of knives. He hid behind accidents and grieving fiancé personas. I closed the laptop. The silence in the storage unit was deafening. I thought about Oliver's laugh. I thought about Quinn asking me to fix his toy truck. I thought about them in that boat, in the dark, looking at Felix. Did they trust him? Did they call out for help? Did he smile when he threw them over? I stood up and walked to the back of the unit. I pulled a large, black case off the shelf. I clicked the latches open. Inside lay my State Route 25 precision rifle, disassembled. Next to it, a Glock 19 with a suppressor, a combat knife, zip ties, a roll of heavy-duty duct tape. I ran my hand over the cold steel of the rifle barrel. The law couldn't touch Felix. He knew how to play the system. He knew which FBI agents to bribe and which judges to charm. He was a professional at killing without consequences. But he had never met a professional hunter. He thought he had buried the evidence. He thought he had buried the past. But he had made one fatal miscalculation. He didn't check the father's resume. I started loading magazines. The click of the rounds sliding into place was the only sound in the room. Click, click, click. The investigation was over. The operation had begun. I had the weapon. I had the training. But before I crossed the line from soldier to vigilante, I needed to be sure. I needed to offer the law one last chance to work. If I pulled that trigger, there was no going back. I had to know, with absolute moral certainty, that the system was broken beyond repair. I needed a witness. The official report said the lake was empty that night. But fishermen are creatures of habit. They have their secret spots, their hidden coves. I spent 6 hours combing the shoreline of Crystal Lake. I found him near the northern inlet, an old man named Mason sitting in a rusted lawn chair, watching his line. "Were you here Tuesday night?" I asked, standing behind him. Mason didn't look up. "Depends who's asking." "Cop. Father," I said. "The twins who drowned." Mason stiffened. He slowly reeled in his line and turned to face me. His face was weathered, his eyes sad. I told the deputy what I heard. He told me to go home and sleep it off. Said I was hearing loons. "Tell me," I said. Mason took a deep breath. I was anchored in the cove about 200 yards from where they found the boat. It was quiet, dead quiet. Then I heard yelling. Not plain yelling, scared yelling. My heart hammered against my ribs. What did they say? I heard a man's voice. Angry. Then I heard a splash. A big one. Then silence. No engine. Just silence for a long time. Then, maybe 20 minutes later, the screaming started. "Help! Help!" The boat flipped. But the screaming was fake, son. It started after the silence. "He threw them in," I whispered. Then he waited for them to die before he called for help. "That's what I told the badge," Mason said. He said the boat flipped in a squall. "But look at this water. Glass." I pulled out a digital recorder. "Mason, tell me that again." On the record, with the digital file burning a hole in my pocket, I drove back to the federal building. This was the smoking gun. This was the proof that premeditation existed. I walked straight past the security desk, flashing my military ID. I didn't wait for an appointment. I kicked open the door to Agent Grant's office. Grant was on the phone. He jumped, dropping the receiver. "Hunter, you can't just barge in here." I slammed the recorder onto his desk. "Play it." "What is this?" "The witness you ignored. The man who heard Felix murder my children." Grant stared at the device. He didn't play it. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands, and sighed. A long, weary sigh of a bureaucrat who was tired of dealing with problems. "Is this Mason?" Grant asked, a sneer curling his lip. "The old guy who lives in a trailer?" "Hunter, the man has 2 DUIs and a history of hallucinations. Any defense attorney would shred this in 5 seconds. It's not evidence. It's the ramblings of a drunk. He was there, Grant. He heard the splashes before the screams." Grant stood up. He walked over to the shredder in the corner of his office. He held the recorder over the slot. "You are a grieving father," Grant said calmly. "You are looking for a villain because you can't accept that nature is cruel. Felix Thorne is a good man. He is setting up a memorial fund for your boys. He is suffering too. Don't you dare say his name," I warned, my voice dropping to a growl. "It's over," Grant said. "I'm doing this for your own good." He dropped the recorder into the shredder. I watched the plastic crunch. I watched the memory chip, the only voice of truth left, turn into dust. Grant dusted off his hands. "Go home, Hunter. Get some therapy. If you come near Felix or this office again, I will arrest you. And I'll make sure you lose your security clearance. I'll ruin you." I looked at Grant. I looked at the shredder. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a safety being disengaged. I realized then that Grant wasn't just lazy. He wasn't just incompetent. He was protecting the investment. Felix had bought him. The law wasn't blind. It was paid for. "You're right," I said. My voice was eerily calm. Grant looked surprised by my sudden compliance. "I am. Yes. It's over." I turned and walked out. I didn't storm out. I didn't yell. I walked with the rhythmic, predatory gait of a man on patrol. I walked out of the building, into the bright afternoon sun. People were walking their dogs. Cars were honking. The world was normal. But I wasn't in that world anymore. I took out my phone. I dialed Ghost. Status. Ghost asked. "The legal avenue is closed," I said. "Initiate the 72-hour protocol." "Hunter." Ghost's voice was serious. "Once you start this, there is no coming back. You will be a fugitive. If you get caught, I can't help you. The unit can't help you." "I'm not asking for help," I said. "I'm asking for a target package." "Sent," Ghost said. "Felix is at his penthouse. He has a flight scheduled for the Maldives in 2 days. One-way ticket. He's not making that flight," I said. I hung up and threw the phone into a trash can. I got into my truck and drove. Not to my house. To the storage unit. I rolled up the door. The smell of gun oil welcomed me back. I took off my dress uniform. I folded it neatly and placed it in a box. I took off the medals, the ribbons, the symbols of a soldier who follows orders. I put on black tactical pants, combat boots, a gray hoodie. I picked up the state Route 25. I checked the scope. I strapped the Glock to my hip. I picked up the roll of duct tape and the heavy-duty zip ties. Then, I picked up a shovel. I looked at myself in the mirror propped up against the wall. The eyes staring back weren't mine. They were dead eyes. Shark eyes. Agent Grant was right about one thing. Hunter, the grieving father, went home. The man who walked out of that storage unit was something else entirely. I locked the door. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. Darkness was coming, and I was the nightmare waiting in it. The Golden Oak high-rise was a fortress of glass and steel in the center of the city. Doorman, keycard elevators, 24-hour security patrols. To a common thief, it was impenetrable. To a Delta Force operator, it was just another obstacle course. I didn't walk through the front door. I went in through the service roof access, bypassing the electronic lock with a frequency cloner I'd borrowed from the agency years ago and never returned. I rappelled down the ventilation shaft, moving silently through the metal guts of the building until I reached the penthouse suite. Felix was out celebrating his victory with Violet. That gave me a 2-hour window. I dropped into the utility room, my boots making no sound on the marble floor. The apartment smelled of expensive cologne and stale scotch. It was a trophy house for a trophy life. I didn't steal anything. I added things. I placed a pinhead-sized microphone behind the master bed headboard. I slipped a GPS tracker into the lining of Felix's favorite briefcase. I tapped into the smart home hub, overriding the admin controls and linking them to my burner laptop. Now, I controlled the lights, the temperature, and the audio system. I walked into the living room. On the mantelpiece, there was a framed photo of Felix and Violet on the boat. They were smiling. My boys weren't in the picture. He had already erased them. I pulled a small, sealed bag from my pocket. Inside was a wet, muddy sneaker. It was Oliver's. I had found it near the dock during my search, washed up in the reeds. The police had missed it. I placed the wet, muddy sneaker in the center of the pristine white rug in the hallway. Then I vanished. By the time Felix and Violet returned, I was sitting in a nondescript utility van parked 3 blocks away, watching them through the feeds. The door opened. Felix walked in, loosening his tie. He looked triumphant. Violet trailed behind him, looking like a ghost in a silk dress. "Champagne," Felix announced, heading for the bar. "We need to toast, Vi. A fresh start. The Maldives is going to be amazing. We'll forget all this ugliness." "I don't want to go," Violet whispered, staring at the floor. "I can't leave them, Felix. They're in the ground." "They're gone, Violet." Felix snapped, the charm evaporating instantly. "Stop dwelling on it. You're bringing me down." He turned toward the hallway. He froze. I zoomed in on the camera feed. Felix was staring at the rug. "What the—" He walked over to the sneaker. He didn't touch it. He stared at it like it was a venomous snake. "Violet," he screamed. "Did you put this here? Is this some kind of sick joke?" Violet walked over, her eyes widening. That's Oliver's shoe. Where did you find it?" "I didn't find it," Felix yelled, his face flushing red. "You brought it inside. You're trying to make me feel guilty." "I didn't," Violet sobbed. "I haven't seen that shoe in days." Felix grabbed the sneaker and ran to the balcony. He threw it off the edge, watching it fall 40 stories into the night. He slammed the glass door and locked it. He was breathing hard. I tapped a key on my laptop. Phase 2. I accessed the surround sound system. I didn't blast music. I set the volume to level 1, barely audible, just at the threshold of human hearing. I played a looped audio file I had extracted from an old home video. "Daddy, look. Watch me jump." Splash. It was faint. A whisper in the walls. Felix poured a drink. He paused. He tilted his head. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Violet shook her head. "Hear what?" "That noise. Like water." "It's the wind, Felix. You're tired." "I'm not tired." He chugged the scotch. I lowered the temperature in the apartment by 10 degrees. Slowly. Felix shivered. He looked around. "Why is it so cold in here?" He walked to the thermostat. It read 70 degrees. But the air blowing from the vents was freezing. I had hacked the sensor to display a false reading while the AC pumped ice-cold air. "It says 70, he shouted, banging on the wall. "This place is broken." He was unraveling. Men like Felix need control. They need the world to obey their rules. When physics and reality start to bend, their minds break. He sat on the couch, pulling a blanket over himself. Violet went to the bedroom, closing the door. He was alone. I waited until 3 a.m. He was dozing off. I triggered the master bedroom lights to flicker. On, off, on, off. Fast, like a strobe light. Felix bolted awake. "Who's there?" I spoke into my headset. I had run my voice through a modulator that dropped the pitch to a sub-bass rumble. It vibrated through the hidden speakers in the walls. 72 hours. Felix jumped up, spinning around. "Who said that?" "Violet. Is that you?" He ran to the bedroom. Violet was asleep, passed out from her medication. He ran back to the living room. He grabbed a golf club from the corner. He was sweating now, eyes darting around the empty room. "Tick-tock. Show yourself," he screamed at the empty air. He ran to the window and looked out at the city. From my van, I could see his silhouette against the glass. He looked small, terrified. He pulled out his phone. I intercepted the call. He was dialing Grant. "Grant, you need to come over here." Felix shouted. "Someone is in my house. Someone is messing with me." I routed the call to a pre-recorded message I had prepared. It was Grant's voice, spliced together from the recording I made in his office. "You are on your own, Felix." Felix dropped the phone. He backed away from the window. He grabbed a bottle of scotch and retreated to the corner of the room, sitting with his back against the wall, the golf club across his knees. He didn't sleep. He watched the shadows. I watched him. I took a sip of lukewarm coffee. He was terrified, yes, but he was still free. He was still breathing the air my sons should have been breathing. This was just the softening up. I wasn't here to haunt him. I was here to harvest him. I looked at the clock. The sun would be up in 2 hours. He had a flight to catch at noon. He would try to run. He would think he could escape the ghost in his apartment by fleeing the country. He was wrong. I started the engine of the van. The vibration hummed through the floorboards. "Run, rabbit," I whispered. "Run right into the trap." The sun rose over the city like a bruised eye, purple and gray. From my vantage point in the van, I saw Felix stumbling out of the lobby of the Golden Oak. He wasn't the polished tycoon anymore. His shirt was untucked, his hair was wild, and he was wearing sunglasses to hide the bags under his eyes. He carried a single duffel bag. He didn't wait for the valet. He ran to his silver Porsche, fumbled with the keys, and peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching. He left Violet upstairs. He abandoned her to deal with the ghosts alone. That's what cowards do. When the ship sinks, they step on women and children to get to the lifeboat. I put the van in gear and pulled out. I stayed 3 cars back. I didn't need to be close. The GPS tracker was beaming his location to the map on my dashboard. He was heading for the interstate. He was going to the international airport. I tapped the keyboard on my laptop. It was time to steer the rat into the maze. I had already hacked into the navigation system of his car the night before. I sent a command to his dashboard display. Alert. Major accident on I-95. Delay 2 hours. Rerouting. Felix slammed his hand on the steering wheel. I saw his brake lights flare. He swerved across 3 lanes of traffic, cutting off a semi-truck to take the exit ramp the GPS suggested. Exit 14. Old River Road. It was a 2-lane stretch of asphalt that wound through abandoned industrial parks and dense forest. No cameras. No traffic. No witnesses. It was the kill zone. I accelerated. The heavy utility van had a modified engine, a beast under the hood that could push 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. I closed the gap. Felix was doing 90, flying around the curves. He checked his rearview mirror. He saw the gray van looming behind him like a storm cloud. He sped up. The Porsche whined as he pushed it to the red line. "You can't outrun fate, Felix," I said calmly. I flipped a switch on my dashboard. The heavy steel push bumper on the front of my van extended slightly. I waited for the perfect spot. A long, straight stretch bordered by a steep embankment on one side and deep woods on the other. I floored it. The van roared, surging forward. I came up on his rear bumper. I didn't ram him. That's amateur hour. I executed a precision immobilization technique, the pit maneuver. I touched my front bumper to his rear quarter panel. Just a kiss. Then, I turned the wheel sharply to the right. The physics took over. The rear of the Porsche lost traction. The car spun violently, tires screaming against the asphalt. Felix lost control. The car careened off the road, sliding sideways into the grassy ditch. It slammed into a dirt berm, rocking onto 2 wheels before crashing back down with a sickening crunch of metal. Dust and steam hissed into the air. I slammed on my brakes, sliding the van sideways to block the road. I was out of the door before the van stopped moving. I moved with the speed of muscle memory. Glock in hand, scanning the perimeter. Clear. I approached the Porsche. The airbags had deployed. Felix was pinned in the driver's seat, coughing, batting at the deflated white bag. He looked dazed. Blood trickled from his nose. He looked up and saw me through the shattered window. He didn't see a grieving father. He saw a figure in black tactical gear, face covered by a ballistic mask, gun drawn. "Help," he wheezed. "Help me." I holstered the gun. I didn't need bullets for this. I ripped the driver's door open. The metal groaned and snapped. I grabbed Felix by his collar and dragged him out of the wreckage. He flailed, trying to hit me, but he was weak and terrified. I threw him onto the grass. "Who are you?" he screamed, scrambling backward on his hands and feet. "I have money. I can pay you. How much do you want?" I reached up and pulled off my mask. Felix froze. His eyes bulged. He stopped breathing. "Hunter," he whispered. "But you're a loser?" I finished his sentence from the funeral. Just a soldier. I stepped closer. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out. Please, he begged, tears mixing with the blood on his face. It was an accident. I swear. Don't kill me. I'm not going to kill you, Felix, I said, cold as ice. That would be too easy. You took 72 hours of my life. You took my future. I'm just taking some time back. He lunged for my legs, desperate. I sidestepped and delivered a single, calculated strike to his carotid artery. His eyes rolled back in his head. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious before he hit the dirt. I checked his pulse. Strong. I pulled a hood over his head and zip-tied his hands and feet. I lifted him effortlessly. He was lighter than a fully loaded ruck, and tossed him into the back of the van. I grabbed his duffel bag from the car and threw it in with him. I looked at the Porsche. It was a wreck, hidden in the ditch. It wouldn't be seen from the road unless someone stopped. By the time they found it, the trail would be cold. I got back in the van and checked the time. The entire extraction had taken 45 seconds. I turned the van around and drove calmly back onto the main road. I didn't speed. I obeyed every traffic law. I wasn't going to the police station. I was heading deep into the state forest to a plot of land my grandfather had bought 50 years ago, a place where the trees were thick and the cell service was dead. I looked in the rearview mirror at the lump in the back. Sleep tight, I whispered. You have a big day ahead of you. The nightmare was just beginning. The sound of a heavy steel bolt sliding into place was the first thing Felix heard. He gasped, waking up from the darkness. He jerked his body, but he didn't move. He was zip-tied to a heavy steel chair bolted to a concrete floor. I stood in the corner, my hand on a dimmer switch. I turned it up slowly. A single, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered to life, illuminating the room. We were 10 feet underground, in a storm bunker my grandfather had built during the Cold War. I had spent the last week soundproofing it with acoustic foam. You could scream in here until your throat bled, and the squirrels outside wouldn't twitch an ear. Felix blinked against the harsh light. He looked around wildly. The walls were gray concrete. The air smelled of damp earth and ozone. Where am I? He croaked. Hunter, you can't do this. This is kidnapping. I didn't answer. I pulled a metal stool over and sat down directly in front of him. We were knee to knee. I placed a small digital recorder on the table between us. I pressed record. Tell me about the wave, Felix, I said. My voice was conversational, like we were discussing the weather. I told you, he shouted, sweating profusely. It was a rogue wave. It hit us broadside. The boat flipped. I stared at him. I didn't blink. I let the silence stretch. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 30 seconds. Silence is a weapon. Most people can't handle it. They feel the need to fill it with noise. Why are you looking at me like that? Felix stammered. It was dark. Maybe it wasn't a wave. Maybe it was a log. I don't know. It happened so fast. The boat didn't flip, I said calmly. I checked the hull. It was dragged, scratched against the dock, and the weather was calm. 0 wind. You're crazy, he spat. You're a paranoid, grief-stricken lunatic. And the 911 call. I continued, ignoring his insult. You called an hour after they died. I analyzed the audio. No water sounds. Just crickets. You were sitting on the boat, dry and comfortable, while my sons were floating in the dark. Felix's jaw tightened. He looked away. I was in shock. Time gets messed up when you're in shock. Let's talk about the money, I said. His head snapped back toward me. The trust fund, I said. $10 million. Clause 4A. If Oliver and Quinn die, Violet gets it all. And since you control Violet. The color drained from his face completely. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. You didn't want a family, I said, leaning in. You wanted a bank account. My boys were just speed bumps on your road to retirement. That's a lie. Felix screamed, straining against the zip ties. The plastic dug into his wrists, drawing blood. I love them. Did you love them when you held them under? I asked. I didn't. Did you love them when you squeezed Oliver's throat? I asked, my voice rising just slightly. I saw the bruise, Felix. Thumbprint. Right here. I tapped my own neck. Stop it. Did Quinn fight back? I asked. He was a scrapper. Did he kick you? Is that why you have that bruise on your shin? I pointed to a dark purple mark on his leg, visible through his torn suit pants. Felix looked down at his leg. He hadn't noticed I'd seen it. He tried to swim, I whispered. He tried to get to the surface. And you pushed him down. A 6-year-old boy. You looked him in the eye and you pushed him down. Shut up, Felix screamed. He was breaking. The narcissist couldn't handle the mirror. He couldn't handle the truth being spoken out loud. Admit it, I said. And this stops. What stops? He panted. You're going to kill me anyway. I'm a soldier, Felix. We have rules. Prisoners who cooperate get better treatment. Tell me the truth, and I'll end it quickly. Lie to me again, and we stay in this room for a very, very long time. I leaned back, crossing my arms. The FBI isn't coming. Grant isn't coming. It's just you, me, and the ghosts. Felix slumped in the chair. He started to cry, but it wasn't the fake crying from the funeral. This was real tears of self-pity. She wouldn't sign the papers, Felix whispered. What papers? The investment papers, Felix sniffed. I needed capital for a deal in Dubai. A big deal. Violet wouldn't touch the trust. She said it was for the boys' college. She said I couldn't touch it. He looked up at me, his eyes wet and full of hate. It was their fault, he shouted suddenly. They were always there, always needing her. Mommy this, mommy that. I couldn't get a moment alone with her to work on her. They were in the way, Hunter. They were just unnecessary expense. My hands curled into fists, but I kept them on my knees. So you took them out on the boat. I told them we were going to look for turtles, Felix said, his voice void of emotion now. We went to the middle of the basin. I cut the engine. And then, I grabbed Oliver first. He was looking at the water. I just tipped him over. He didn't even scream. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. And Quinn saw it, Felix said. He started screaming. He tried to run to the front of the boat. I caught him. He bit me. Little brat bit me. So you threw him in. I had to hold him under, Felix said, looking at his hands. He kept popping up. He was a strong swimmer. I had to use the boat hook to keep him down. The room spun. He used the boat hook. He pushed my son's head underwater with a metal pole like he was clearing debris. And then I waited. Felix finished, letting out a long breath. I waited until the bubbles stopped. I drove the boat into the dock to scrape the side, to make it look like a crash. Then I called 911. He looked at me, almost defiant. There. You have your truth. Are you happy? I did it. I killed them. Now shoot me and get it over with. I reached out and pressed stop on the recorder. I stood up. I walked to the corner and picked up a shovel. Felix flinched. You said you'd make it quick. I lied, I said. I walked behind him and cut the zip ties on his ankles, but I left his hands bound. I grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and hauled him to his feet. Move, I commanded. Where are we going? He whimpered, his defiance gone. To the woods, I said. I have one more spot to show you. I marched him toward the heavy steel door. He had confessed. He thought that was the end. He thought confession brought absolution, or at least a quick bullet. He didn't know about the box. He didn't know about the 72 hours. I pushed him out into the cool night air. The moon was high. The forest was silent. Walk, I said. The forest floor was uneven, a tangle of roots and decaying leaves that snagged at our feet. I didn't stumble. I knew this land. I had played hide-and-seek here as a boy. I had camped here with my grandfather. Felix, however, fell 3 times in the first 100 yards. Get up, I ordered, nudging him with the tip of the shovel. He scrambled to his feet, weeping. His expensive Italian loafers were ruined, coated in mud. His suit was torn. The master of the universe was reduced to a frightened animal being herded into the dark. Hunter, please, he sobbed, his breath coming in jagged gasps. I'll give you the money. I'll sign over the trust. I'll turn myself in. Just don't kill me out here. Keep moving, I said. We walked for another 10 minutes until the trees thinned out into a small, circular clearing. The moonlight hit the center of the clearing, illuminating a mound of fresh, dark earth. Next to it was a rectangular hole. Felix stopped. He let out a low, guttural moan, the sound of a man looking at his own grave. No, he whispered. No, no, no. He turned to run. It was a pathetic attempt. I caught him by the back of his collar and threw him toward the hole. He landed hard on the edge, staring down into the black abyss. Look inside, I said. He trembled, peering over the edge. It wasn't just a dirt pit. I had built a box. It was constructed from pressure-treated lumber, reinforced with steel brackets. It was 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 3 feet deep. Get in, I said. You're burying me alive. Felix screamed, his voice cracking. He scrambled backward, clawing at the grass. You're insane. You can't do this. I'm not killing you, Felix, I said, leaning on the shovel. I'm giving you a timeout. I pointed to the features of the box. There is a 4-inch PVC pipe running from the top of the box to the surface. That's your air supply. It's screened, so bugs won't get in, but the air will be thin. You'll have to breathe slowly to conserve oxygen. If you panic, you'll pass out. I pointed to the corner of the box. There is a gallon jug of water. And a bucket. You figure out what the bucket is for. And finally, I pointed to the small, red light blinking in the upper corner of the lid. And that, I said, is a camera. Night vision. Audio enabled. It's wired to a hard drive buried 50 yards away. Felix stared at me, his eyes wide with horror. Why? Because I want to watch, I said cold and flat. I want to see what happens to a man's mind when he is left alone with his sins. I checked my watch. The investigation into my son's deaths lasted exactly 72 hours. From the moment you made that fake 911 call to the moment Agent Grant closed the file. 72 hours of lies. 72 hours where you walked free, eating at restaurants, sleeping in a soft bed. I stepped closer. So, that is your sentence. You get 72 hours in the box. If you survive the darkness, if you don't lose your mind, I'll dig you up. Then I'll hand you and the confession tape over to the state police. Not the FBI. The Stoddies hate the feds. 3 days. Felix choked out. In there. 72 hours. I corrected. Get in. Or I fill the hole without the box. Felix looked at the shovel. He looked at my face. He saw zero negotiation. Weeping uncontrollably, he lowered himself into the wooden coffin. He curled into a fetal position, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. Hunter, he whispered, looking up at me one last time. It's dark. I'm scared of the dark. My 6-year-olds were scared of the dark too, I said. But you put them in the water anyway. I picked up the heavy wooden lid. See you on the other side, Felix. I slammed the lid down. Thud. The sound echoed through the clearing. I grabbed the drill I had left by the pile of dirt. I drove 6 heavy-duty screws into the lid, sealing him in. Whir. Chunk. Whir. Chunk. Felix started screaming. The sound was muffled, dull. He was pounding on the wood. Let me out. Please. I can't breathe. I'm sorry. I ignored him. I picked up the shovel. I drove the blade into the pile of dirt. I tossed the first scoop onto the lid. Thump. Hunter. Thump. I'll give you anything. Thump. I worked with a steady, rhythmic pace. The pile of dirt disappeared, shovel by shovel, covering the wood. The screaming became fainter, more distant. Eventually, the hole was filled. I tamped down the earth with my boots. I scattered leaves and branches over the fresh dirt to camouflage it. If you walked past this spot, you would never know a man was lying 6 feet beneath your boots. The only evidence was the small, white PVC pipe sticking up 3 inches from the ground, hidden behind a fern. I stood there for a moment in the silence. The screaming had stopped. He was saving his air. Or maybe he was already broken. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel victory. I just felt balance. The scales had tipped back. I walked 50 yards into the tree line to a hollowed-out stump where I had concealed a waterproof Pelican case. Inside was a small monitor powered by a car battery. I turned it on. The screen flickered to life in grainy green and black night vision. Felix was lying on his back in the box. His eyes were wide open, staring up at the wood inches from his face. He was hyperventilating. His chest was heaving up and down. He looked at the camera. He whispered something. I turned up the volume on the receiver. "I'm going to die here." "Maybe," I said to the screen. I sat down on a log, rifle across my lap. I had 3 days to wait. I wasn't going anywhere. I would watch every second. I would make sure he felt every tick of the clock. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky with streaks of red. Day 1 had begun. The sun didn't rise on the 3rd day. It bled into the sky. A heavy, gray fog had rolled in overnight, wrapping the forest in a suffocating blanket of mist. I sat on the log, staring at the patch of disturbed earth. My watch beeped. Beep, beep, beep. 72 hours. The time was up. On the monitor, Felix wasn't moving. He had stopped screaming 20 hours ago. He had stopped begging 10 hours ago. For the last few hours, he had just been staring at the camera lens, blinking in a rhythm that didn't make sense. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. I stood up. My knees popped. I had barely slept. I picked up the drill and the shovel. I walked to the grave. I didn't rush. I shoveled the dirt away with the same steady pace I used to bury him. It took 40 minutes to reach the wood. I cleared the soil off the screw heads. Whir. Chunk. I backed the first screw out. Then the second. Felix didn't react to the noise. He didn't pound on the lid. I removed the last screw. I gripped the edge of the heavy wooden lid and heaved it open. The daylight flooded the box. The smell hit me first: sweat, urine, and raw fear. Felix was curled in the corner, his knees pulled to his chest. He looked up at the light, his eyes dilated and wild. He didn't look like a human being anymore. He looked like a creature that had forgotten the sun existed. "Felix," I said. He flinched violently, covering his face with his hands. "No, no water. Don't put me in the water." He was broken. The isolation, the darkness, and the weight of his own guilt had shattered his mind. "It's over," I said. I reached down and grabbed his arm. He didn't fight. He was limp, like a rag doll. I hauled him out of the box and laid him on the grass. He shivered uncontrollably, clutching the dirt, digging his fingers into the soil as if checking that it was real. "I saw them," Felix whispered, staring at the trees. "In the box. They were in the box with me. The boys. They were wet." He started to weep, a high-pitched, broken sound. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." I didn't feel pity, but I didn't feel the need for more violence, either. The man who killed my sons was gone. This shell on the ground was all that was left. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the digital recorder with his confession on it. I also pulled out a flash drive containing the evidence against Agent Grant, the financial records, the bribes, the botched investigation notes. I zip-tied the plastic bag containing the drives to Felix's belt loop. Then, I pulled out my phone. I dialed 911. "Emergency," the operator said. "There is a man in the clearing off Old River Road, near the hiking trail," I said, my voice disguised. "He is confessing to a double homicide, and he has evidence of FBI corruption on his person. Send the state troopers." "Not the feds." "Sir, who is this?" "Sir." I crushed the phone under my boot. I looked at Felix one last time. "Live with it," I said. I turned and vanished into the fog. The next morning, I didn't wait 6 months. I didn't wait a year. I was already moving. I sat in a diner 3 towns over, watching the news on the television mounted in the corner. The headline flashed in bold red letters: "Justice from the grave." The reporter was standing outside the state police headquarters. In a shocking turn of events, wealthy businessman Felix Thorne was found wandering in the woods yesterday, suffering from severe exposure and a mental breakdown. Police recovered audio recordings where Thorne details the murder of his girlfriend's 2 children. The screen changed. It showed a mugshot. Not Felix. It was Agent Grant. Acting on evidence found at the scene, state police also raided the offices of FBI agent Marcus Grant early this morning. He has been taken into custody on charges of obstruction of justice, bribery, and racketeering. The case has been reopened, and the accident ruling has been overturned to homicide. I took a sip of my black coffee. Then, the camera cut to a shot of Violet. She was walking out of the police station, surrounded by reporters. She looked devastated. She wasn't the victim of a tragedy anymore. She was the woman who had slept next to a monster. She would have to live with the fact that her trust had cost her children their lives. That was a prison worse than any cell. The waitress came over to refill my cup. "Crazy story, huh?" she asked, gesturing to the TV. "They say the dad did it. The ex-husband. They say he hunted them down like a ghost. Police can't find him anywhere." I looked at the screen. They showed an old military photo of me. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Crazy. You look a little like him," she said, squinting. "I get that a lot," I said. I placed a $20 bill on the table. "Keep the change." I walked out of the diner. My truck was parked in the back. I threw my bag into the passenger seat. I wasn't Hunter anymore. Hunter died when his boys went into the water. I drove to the cemetery one last time. I didn't get out. I just rolled down the window. The sun was shining on the two small stones. The fresh flowers Violet had left were wilting, but the two brass challenge coins I had placed there were still glinting in the light. Oppressors beware. I had balanced the scales. I hadn't brought them back, but I had made sure their killer paid the price. I put the truck in gear. The road ahead was long and empty. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in a long time, the noise in my head was gone. The mission was complete. I drove toward the horizon, just another shadow on the highway, disappearing into the wind. Story finished. This story has come to an end, but the journey continues. I have a question for you, and I want you to be honest. If you were in my boots, standing over that box with the shovel in your hand, would you have dug him up, or would you have let the air run out? Let me know your answer in the comments. It tells me a lot about who you are. Also, I want to write what you want to hear. Please tell me in the comments. Where are you listening from? City or country? What kind of story do you want next? Do you want more Special Forces revenge? A cheating wife caught in the act? Or maybe a story about a brother betraying a brother? Tell me what you crave, and I will create it. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please gently hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us bring more justice to the darkness. Until the next thriller, stay safe, watch your back, and never ignore the signs.